October 331 BC, near Gaugamela in Mesopotamia. A flat, open plain. No forest, no mountain pass, no riverbank to protect a smaller army. Just dust, silence, and the sight of an empire stretching across the horizon. In front of Alexander stood the army of Darius III. Ancient accounts describe it as a force of overwhelming size, tens of thousands, perhaps far more, drawn from every corner of the Persian Empire. Cavalry filled both wings. Scythed chariots waited at the front. War elephants stood behind them. And at the center sat Darius himself, the King of Kings, ready to end the Macedonian invasion in one decisive day. Opposite him stood Alexander, around 47,000 men, far fewer than the Persians, far from home, standing on ground chosen by their enemy. This was exactly the battlefield Darius wanted, wide enough for cavalry to envelop, flat enough for chariots to tear through infantry, open enough for Persian numbers to finally matter. By every rule of ancient war, Alexander should have been trapped, but by sunset, the Persian center would collapse. Darius would flee, and the empire that had ruled the Near East for 2 centuries would begin to fall into Macedonian hands. So how did Alexander survive a battlefield built to destroy him? And how did he turn a Persian trap into the place where Persia broke? To understand Gaugamela, you have to understand the way Alexander fought. He did not move like a cautious invader. He fought as if hesitation itself was defeat. In 334 BC, he crossed into Asia with a relatively small army and a massive claim that he had come to punish Persia for its earlier invasions of Greece and prove Macedonian power on Asian soil. But beneath the politics was a harsher truth. His campaign could not afford a long pause. If he looked weak, if the Persian satraps believed he could be contained, his invasion could collapse before it truly began. At the Granicus River, Alexander almost died proving that point. The Persians waited on difficult ground. Many commanders would have slowed down. Alexander attacked. He drove his cavalry into the fight, placing himself at the most dangerous point of the battle. Ancient sources describe how close he came to being killed before his companions saved him. He survived, and Asia Minor began to open. Then came Issus. This time, Darius himself came to stop him, but the battlefield was narrow, squeezed between mountains and sea, and Persian numbers could not fully unfold. Alexander looked past the mass of soldiers and saw the one target that mattered most: Darius. He struck toward the king. The Persian center shook, and Darius fled, leaving behind his camp, treasure, and even members of his family. Alexander learned something powerful there. In an empire built around royal authority, the king was not just a commander. He was the symbol holding the army together. Break that symbol in public, and the army could break with it.
After Issus, Alexander moved relentlessly. Tyre resisted and was taken after a brutal siege. Egypt welcomed him, and he was crowned pharaoh. His legend grew with every victory. But Darius was still alive. And as long as Darius remained king, the empire still had a center. This time, Darius would not repeat the mistakes of Issus. He would not fight in a narrow place. He would not let terrain erase his numbers. He chose a wide plain near Gaugamela and prepared the ground for the weapons he trusted most. This was not just a battlefield. It was a stage for Persian revenge. The night before the battle, Darius kept his army alert, fearing a Macedonian night attack. Some of Alexander's officers wanted exactly that: strike in darkness, avoid the full force of the trap, and weaken the Persians before dawn. Alexander refused. Ancient tradition says he would not steal victory like a thief. Whether the phrase is exact or not, the meaning fits him perfectly. He wanted Darius beaten in daylight, in front of his own army, on the ground he had chosen. At dawn, the 2 armies formed. The Persian line looked enormous. On one wing stood Bactrian cavalry, fast riders from the eastern regions of the empire. On the other stood forces under Mazaeus, with cavalry and troops from Mesopotamia, Syria, and nearby lands. In front were scythed chariots, designed to rip lanes through packed infantry. Nearby were elephants from India, rare and terrifying to men and horses unused to them. In the center, surrounded by guards and nobles, was Darius. This was imperial power made visible. Different peoples, different languages, different weapons, all gathered under one throne. The Macedonian army was smaller, but far more disciplined. At its core stood the phalanx, heavy infantry armed with long sarissas, forming a dense wall of iron points. Around them moved lighter troops, archers, javelin men, peltasts, and elite infantry able to react where the heavy line could not. On the right was Alexander with the companion cavalry, his decisive strike force. On the left was Parmenion, ordered to hold against a Persian wing that could easily outflank him. That was the problem. Darius had width, Alexander had precision.
If the Macedonians stood still, they could be surrounded. If they advanced straight ahead, they would enter the prepared killing ground. So Alexander did something unexpected. He began moving his line to the right. Slowly, diagonally, the Macedonians shifted across the plain, away from the center of the ground Darius had prepared. It looked strange, even dangerous, but it forced the Persian left to respond. Bessus, commanding that side, could not allow Alexander to slide beyond the prepared field, so Persian cavalry moved outward to match him. More riders stretched farther and farther from the center. That was the first weakness. Alexander was not escaping the trap, he was pulling it out of shape. The Persian line began to stretch. The connection between the left wing and the center became thinner. And when Bessus finally attacked, his cavalry surged forward against Alexander's right. The bait had worked. Now Darius released the weapons meant to break the Macedonian line. The scythed chariots thundered forward. Their blades were built to terrify infantry, to make men lose formation before impact. Behind them came the pressure of the wider Persian advance. But Alexander had prepared his soldiers for this moment. The Macedonian line did not panic. Light troops targeted drivers and horses, missiles flew, and when the chariots reached the main formation, the infantry opened lanes. Instead of smashing through packed ranks, many chariots rushed into empty corridors, lost momentum, or were struck from the sides. The weapon that was supposed to tear the army apart failed to break it. The elephants did not decide the battle either. They added fear and pressure, but they did not shatter the Macedonian system before Alexander found his moment. On the opposite flank, the danger was much worse. Mazaeus pressed hard against Parmenion. The Macedonian left was under real strain. If that side collapsed, Alexander's breakthrough would mean nothing. Parmenion did not need to win. He needed to hold long enough for Alexander to act. And then the opening appeared. As the Persian left was drawn outward and the center adjusted under pressure, a gap formed near the Persian middle. It was small, temporary, and surrounded by chaos. But Alexander had built his entire method of war around seeing moments like this. He gathered the companion cavalry into a wedge. Then he turned inward, not toward the nearest enemy, not toward the easiest victory, toward Darius. The Macedonian right struck like a spear into the Persian center. The battle, which had seemed spread across an enormous plain, suddenly narrowed into one terrifying point. Alexander was coming for the king. For Darius, this was the nightmare of Issus returning. His chariots had failed, his cavalry was engaged, his infantry was committed, and now the man he needed to contain was driving straight toward him. The guards fought to hold. The Persian center tightened, wavered, and began to shake under the pressure. Darius faced the choice that decides kings: stay and risk death or capture, flee and lose the confidence of the army. He fled, and the moment he turned away, the center of the Persian army began to lose its soul.
Orders weakened, units hesitated. Men who had been part of an imperial machine became soldiers trying to understand whether the battle was still being fought or already lost. The army had not been destroyed, but the symbol holding it together had vanished. Alexander pursued. If he could catch Darius, the war might end that day. But then a message reached him from the left. Parmenion was in danger. Mazaeus was still pressing hard, and the Macedonian flank could still collapse. Alexander had to choose: chase the king or save the army. He turned back. That decision mattered. It showed that even Alexander, hungry for decisive victory, understood that a captured king meant nothing if his own line broke behind him. He returned pressure to the threatened flank, stabilized the Macedonian position, and the Persian attack lost its final chance. The battle was over. Darius had escaped, but his empire had not.
Gaugamela was more than a battlefield victory. It was the moment Persian power lost its center of gravity. Before that day, Darius could still claim to be the legitimate ruler of a functioning empire. He still commanded satraps, armies, treasuries, and royal cities. He still represented continuity. After Gaugamela, that image was shattered. Alexander advanced into the heart of Persian power. Babylon opened its gates. Susa followed. The wealth of the empire began passing into Macedonian hands. Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of Persian kingship, would eventually fall as well. But Darius was still alive, and that meant the war was not finished. Alexander could take cities, he could seize treasure, he could defeat armies, but as long as Darius lived, there remained a rival king whose name could gather resistance.
So Alexander moved east, not simply for land, not simply for revenge, for legitimacy. He had broken the Persian army at Gaugamela, but he still had to claim the inheritance of the empire. To do that, he had to follow the man who still carried the title King of Kings. That pursuit would lead him beyond the open plain, into harsher country, where brilliance on a wide battlefield would not be enough. Because the next Persian stand would not be built on numbers, it would be built on stone, narrow passes, and ambush. In 330 BC, at the Persian gates, Alexander would face the kind of battlefield Gaugamela was not, a place where his army could be trapped, slowed, and nearly destroyed. Gaugamela broke the empire's center, but Persia was not finished fighting.